This episode of the MSP podcast is brought to you by Big Tex Outdoors. Everything you could possibly need for your firearm. If he doesn't have it, you probably don't need it. And PHLster holsters. Can't do a sub 5 second fast drill? We'll get a PHLster holster. If you still can't, well, at least you know it's not the holster's fault. Hey guys, welcome to the Modern Samurai Project. Again, this is nicknamed the Get Better Podcast. It's about people that are living the self-reliant lifestyle, right? Why do I say self-reliant instead of like the 2A lifestyle? Because it's more than just GATS, right? It's physical fitness. It could be nutrition. It could be martial arts. It could be a variety of things because you need to realize that no one is coming to save you, right? So guys, today we got Adam Scholl. Adam Scholl. Adam, you're in Philly, right? Or thereabouts?
Yeah, just outside of Philly. Yep.
Right. He owns Scholl Security Group, and he's got all of the belts, right? So instead of me kind of going over and brushing a little bit of his background, Adam, can you go into that, brother?
Sure. Law enforcement officer for 9 years in the city of Philly with an agency that doesn't exist anymore, all of which doing high-risk warrant service. A couple of years assigned to the Marshals Federal Task Force, a couple of years assigned to the FBI Violent Crime Task Force. Was a firearms defensive tactics CQB instructor for all that kind of stuff. I was the guy that would find schools to go to. They would approve it, and then I'd come back and try to, tweak it and make it work for us for what we do. Worked for the DoD as a contractor, as an instructor over at Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst for a combined total of about 6 years. Some of it part-time, some of it full-time. As what was considered a combat skills instructor or a fieldcraft instructor. So I taught everything from weapons and CQB to high threat driving, combatives, surveillance detection, some podium stuff like verbal de-escalation of conflict, escalation of force. Got a lot of years in private security, doing everything from nightclub stuff. I did nightclub stuff for about 17, 18 years in Philly. I was the director of security at 13 pretty big clubs. That's actually the least sexy thing on the resume, but probably the most relevant thing to.
I don't know, bro. Fucking running nightclubs in Philly.
The majority of what we're going to talk about.
Jesus.
All the hands-on stuff came there for the most part.
Yeah.
Was the director of security for a high net worth family for a while, about 7 years. Right now, I'm currently working, in addition to my classes teaching, I currently work in executive protection, surveillance, counter surveillance. So I'm a project manager for a company. I basically stand up executive protection teams all over the world, surveillance teams all over the world in support of our clients. And then sometimes I'm out there doing it myself. Sometimes I'm just kind of the guy behind everything, getting it spun up. I'm actually packing. I don't know if you can see it's got all kinds of shit on it now, but I'm leaving tomorrow for Central America for a week-long protection detail. So I'll be down there. On the combative side, I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on and off my entire adult life, so about 18 years now. Took a pretty big break in there, but the last 6 or 7 years I've been super consistent. Have a black belt in that under the Renzo Gracie organization here in Pennsylvania. We're an affiliate, and I also have a black belt in Krav Maga, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And that's pretty much it, man. In a nutshell, just always been into training, always been into. Specifically with the training stuff, I've always been into the hard skills. I've always been into the shooting, the fighting, the edge weapon stuff. As I got older and a little more mature, the medical stuff, the driving stuff, some of the stuff that people forget about. But it's always been my thing. It's always been my interest. Ended up working in career paths that, supported that as well. So, it made sense to go out and train on my own time and dime. Did ECQC with Craig, did Edge Weapons Overview with Craig. I'm actually going to be AIing for him in March. He's coming back to Philly and asked me to help out. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So right now my audience was going, all right, well, so he's not a cool guy. So, no, I'm kidding, dude. That was extensive, dude. That's awesome stuff. So
it's a lengthy situation, but I think it's important because it's so much of so many different things. I kind of have like a full spectrum view on it. And it's not like I was just a cop for 10 years and then that's it. And I started teaching classes or whatever. I've done a lot of different things. And I think each of those things has made me realize something, that I've brought back into what I teach, how I work now, what I do. So I think it's kind of important,
So that's interesting because one of the things that I have always said, and actually I got from a previous mentor of mine on the on the combative side, is that you have to train all the ranges,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
If you start from a further, non-contact, it could be firearms, it could be non-lethal stuff, yada yada, medium punches and kicks, intermediate elbows, knees, closed, dirty boxing, inside grappling, yada yada, super close, ground fighting, right? And you cover all that, right?
Yep.
And I kind of want to get into that. I mean, was that a philosophy, or did that shit just kind of happen? You
Some
know?
some of it just happened. I mean, working in nightclubs, you get involved in a lot of shit. And early on, I was like 17 years old when I started. I realized that I had done traditional martial arts as a kid. I did
Mhm.
karate as a kid, and I realized very quickly that the things that I was using in these altercations in the nightclub business had nothing to do with my karate, and everything to do with my athleticism and my strength at the time. I was a
Mhm.
I was a big guy. I'm still 265. I'm 6 foot tall. I was at the time like probably 225 and actually fit, uh,
Mhm.
playing high school and college football. So a mentor of mine in the nightclub business turned me on to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And
Mhm.
at that time, I knew what it was. I'd watched the UFCs and I thought it was cool. But I never really knew anywhere that taught it. It wasn't like now where you can spit on a school, and they're right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I went into the city, Philadelphia, started training under Steve Maxwell. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, so him,
Okay.
him and Ricky and Phil Miglerese were my first jujitsu.
Yeah, the balance dudes and
Yeah, they're
everything.
great team,
Yeah.
and they all worked in the nightclub business. We all worked together at one time or another. So I mean, it's a small circle, um, but philosophy wise, it was kind of like, all right, let me get into some stuff that's more relevant
Mhm.
to the grappling. Um, Met some Krav dudes down in Atlantic City when I was at a UFC fight, hanging out with Chuck Liddell and some other dudes,
Okay.
and they were holding up Boss Rutan, who was drunk as shit, and it was like, back then UFC wasn't as popular as it is now, so it was kind of like more underground. But I saw Boss, went over there, started talking to these dudes. They're like, "Oh, we teach Krav Maga." I'm like, "Oh, I've heard of that. I've got a book or two on it." They're like, "Come check it out." So I did that. So I mean, it was kind of like, I started to run around and pick and choose and try to find out what makes sense. When I turned 21, I got a gun. I started shooting. I was probably shooting all fucked up at that time, carrying stupid guns in stupid ways, shitty holsters, shitty belts, like the whole thing. But over time, if that's your interest, that's your thing. You start,
Yeah.
delving into it a little bit deeper, and then you try to seek out people who are more knowledgeable than you in all those areas and start, learning from them and importing it. So my philosophy for like personal security is very similar to what we do with like private security, right? The
Mhm.
Secret Service protects the president in concentric rings, working from the outermost perimeter to the innermost perimeter. So all those ranges that you talked about are the same whether I'm walking around trying to keep myself safe, I'm out there with my family, or I'm out there working a client. I'm looking from the outside in, and
Mhm.
that goes hand in hand with the hard skill stuff. The guy's 100 meters away, that's going to be a projectile weapon problem if I have
Right.
one at the time.
Right.
If he's, bad breath distance, now we're talking about, hard skills, striking, combatives, grappling, so on and so forth. So I needed to have skills in all those areas because of the nature of the work that I was doing and because I thought it was important, to be able to protect not only myself, but other people. So I went out and I started figuring out, what makes sense at each range. What do I need to do here? And it's an ever evolving body of work. It's a never
Yep.
ending thing. It's not like I'm there, check. I got my jujitsu black belt. I can sit back and I'm good to go. It doesn't work that way.
Nope.
So, yeah.
Nope. Not at all. Awesome. And it's a super interesting analogy between your own personal protection and the ranges and how you do executive protection with the concentric circles and stuff, right? Um, that's awesome, dude. For some reason, it always brings to mind the thing that like I've stolen from my professor, who everybody says, but everything is jujitsu, right? And if you look at your jujitsu game and how that goes into the ranges, and then how that goes into this concentric circles, everything is jujitsu. You know what I mean? You get
Yeah, I heard
all
you
those.
talk with Paul Sharp about that
Yeah.
not too long ago. So I listened to that episode. I've been a fan of Paul's work for a long time. we've
just the nicest guy on the face of the
communicated.
earth,
Yeah,
too,
I mean, it
dude.
seems like I've never had the pleasure of training with him. We've spoken quite a bit through social media and things like that, and it seems like we're two peas in a pod. I think we would get along very well.
And you know what? I'm finding that about most jujitsu guys. You know what I mean? In that, have I ever? I don't think I've ever met. I've met cocky guys,
Yeah,
right? I've met spazzy guys. Blah blah blah. I've met guys that are just interested in winning and stuff like. But were they assholes?
at
I
our,
don't think so.
I can tell you that at our place, it just doesn't exist,
Yeah.
and that's mostly due to the culture of our gym. We get guys come in like I'm a fucking MMA fighter and I'm a street fighter, and we're like, okay,
Right.
cool. Here's a gi or whatever,
Yeah.
shorts and a t-shirt. Come on over here, and most people that come to us are like normal, 9 to 5 nurses, whatever, regular everyday people just looking for a hobby or looking for
Yeah.
self-defense or whatever. But you do get some douchebags every once in a while. They never last. They're there for a
Nope.
week or two, and then and I think the reason that everybody in jujitsu, everybody in the jujitsu community, generally speaking, obviously there's outliers, is cool, is because they've had their ego beaten out of them. I mean, I went to Maxercise as a 225-pound, jacked college linebacker, middle
Oh
linebacker,
yeah. Yeah.
and got choked out by Steve Maxwell's 12-year-old son, Zach.
Yep. Who's a monster?
Who's a monster now, yeah. When he was 12, and they're
Right.
like, let him put this choke on you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm going to throw this dude across the room if he really squeezes me. And as soon as he squeezed me, I realized that I was screwed. And very quickly, I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, this is something that I need to get, more time behind, more familiarity behind. But like you said, man, the jiu-jitsu community is generally very cool. And I think it's simply because Joe Rogan said this, you can't be full of shit and do jiu-jitsu, right?
You cannot.
And that's the God's honest truth. I mean, you can't fake your way through jiu-jitsu. You can get that Brazilian dude that throws a black belt on the flight over, like you said on previous episodes.
Yeah.
And cool, man, you can wear whatever belt you want, but the reality is, your jiu-jitsu is going to come out when you're on the mat. So
Yep.
I don't give a shit what belt
100%.
you're wearing. If you come if you come out and you roll and it doesn't support that, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
And I think that's the biggest difference between, say, traditional martial arts, traditional striking arts, right, as opposed to jujitsu. And in no way am I criticizing the traditional martial arts, right? Everything is a progression. I've got that background in Taekwondo. Fortunately, in high school, I met a bunch of crazy dudes that did Muay Thai and stuff like that. But what I've always said is whether you walk into some Taekwondo schools or karate schools or whatnot, you walk in and you can cut the testosterone with a knife,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh
And
yeah.
it's because that black belt, again, all due respect, it's part of the mechanics, right? That black belt knows that if an hyper athletic 18-year-old walks in there that has some basic skills, they've got a striker's chance. And they could get
Yeah.
embarrassed. So the testosterone is there, the positioning or the whatever I'm trying to say, the puffing of the chest are there. You walk into a jiu-jitsu school and it doesn't matter. It's like, hey, bro, come over here. Oh, that's cool. You've got that athletic background. Look at those muscles. Awesome. So listen, go roll with the 12-year-old blue belt girl over there for me real quick. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? And go ahead. I'm sorry, bro.
No. My experience with the traditional martial arts has been that it's a lot of posturing. And I think that the reason for that, if I had to just put one thing on it off the top of my head, is that they generally don't compete in a Craig Douglas terminology would be like competitive and non-consensual manner, right? So at the end of those classes, those guys are not really banging. They're kicking X-ray paper and hitting pads and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of resistance. And without that resistance, there's just no way to know whether what you're doing is constructive or it's productive in any way. So the big difference that I see between jiu-jitsu, and I've told this to cops, is, why I think jiu-jitsu is so important. It's not that 100% of fights go to the ground. That's not true. I've been involved in a gazillion fights, and I can count on one hand the amount that went to the ground, other than the person just being knocked the fuck out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like, let me take you down and grapevine and all this bullshit. But yeah, man, I think that, from the jujitsu side of things, it just, when you have that competitive and non-consensual thing that happens at the end of class when you shake hands and roll, and definitively, I could do this or I can't. That kind of that sits in the back of your mind, and that makes the jujitsu guys more of a cool collective, calm bunch, because they know what they can do. The karate guys, I think in the back of their mind, a lot of them are still thinking like, yeah, I'm not really sure. Or they've totally, on the other end, convinced themselves that they're just a badass, and that's where that, puffing and posturing comes. Jeff Thompson has some really good material on that. Jeff Thompson with a G from the UK. He's the guy that coined the term the fence.
Okay.
He's involved with the British Combat Association. He's got a couple really good books, but his book, Watch My Back, is about his life experience as a martial artist, then going to work in nightclubs. And he worked in some of the worst clubs in Coventry in the UK, got involved in some really crazy stuff, knife stuff, brass knuckle stuff, impact weapons, the whole thing. And basically what he says is that as a traditional martial artist, he just never felt confident. He always kind of thought in the back of his mind, like, I'm not really sure, that this is going to work. And then he went to work in clubs, and he figured out real quickly that it didn't. So he started tweaking it and modifying it and made it work. But
so I think the element that's missing in a lot of, even in sparring, even like, the old school hard style stuff. Like, I mean, when I was doing Taekwondo growing up, right, it's like mats. No, bro, hardwood.
Right.
It's like, oh, sorry, you got swept, dude. Sorry. Get on up. Treat the hipper later on when you wake up tomorrow. But even then, I think the key difference between the two is the lack of constant pressure. From traditional to jujitsu. A lot of people know, and I'm sure you know this since we're both part of the. I'm training. I'm taking a break. I'm training. I'm taking a break. Dude, I started jiu-jitsu in '96 under John Lewis. You brought up Chuck Liddell. Oh, yeah.
Liddell's, jiu-jitsu instructor.
What's that?
I said that's Chuck's original jiu-jitsu.
Right. Oh, no, exactly. So here's the funny thing, right? I started training with John in '96. He was literally 2 blocks away from my apartment where I lived, right? I stopped training at like the end of '97 because I got promoted to branch manager and it was just taking all my time, yada, yada. Well, '98 is when BJ Penn, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, all those guys. And it's a good thing, dude, because we had to get the hell out of Vegas because my wife hated it. Right. And if I was training with those dudes, it probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah. So who knows?
I had Chuck in Philly one time, way back in the day. It's probably like 2002. And he came, after we went and hung out at that fight in Atlantic City. Yeah. I think he fought Kevin Randleman in Atlantic City.
Oof.
I went to that fight. Then we all hung out afterwards at an after party, which is nothing like the after parties now. I mean, it was literally like 40 dudes, all fighters, Pat Miletich, Tim Cynthia, Frank Mir, all those guys, and Chuck was bartending. He disappointed himself bartender. But anyway, the next night he came to the club that I was running in the city, and we were joking around. We were drinking heavily, obviously, and then I was talking shit because I was a young, idiot doing jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, yeah, man, but you got to work your grappling, bro. Like, you don't have the grappling. And he's like, dude, I wrestled in college and, I'm a purple belt under John Lewis. I'm like, whatever. So he's like, you want to roll right now? So I'm like, yeah. So we roll on this like shitty carpet floor at the club. That's probably got 32 types of hepatitis.
You ain't lying.
And he beat my ass. So he put me down pretty bad. But he was cool as shit about it. He was wearing a tap out hoodie at the time. That was like the thing.
Yeah.
And he gave me the hoodie off his back. He's like, here, man, keep it. I get these for free.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, dude. It had all those variances of hepatitis, but now it had staph because he just got done fighting Randleman, dude. Remember that picture of Randleman with the fucking.
Oh man, did you ever see those pictures? It's like it looks like a giant hole.
Yeah. They took he looked like bitten by a shark, man. I'm like, that dude's still alive, man. You think he'd be dead after that shit? Anyway, clean your mats, fellas. Clean your mats. Yeah. So here's another interesting question with that. Have you found that your previous experience slash techniques or whatever from your traditional martial arts, once you incorporated that with jujitsu, that shit worked now.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. My experience with traditional martial arts was really as a kid. So to be honest with you, most of it kind of came in one ear and out the other. I retained a lot of the flexibility for like kicking and stuff. Like I don't look like a guy who could kick over his head. I can. I don't ever do it because there's really no reason to. I've done it a handful of times in real fights just because I don't know what the hell happened. Something somewhere, said kick that dude in the face, and I did. But no, so I don't have enough. Like I didn't do it enough as an adult to really bridge that gap. So my jujitsu started off as just like heavy top pressure, pass guard, and just smash people. If I really am backed into a corner, that's still what it defaults to. But obviously, as the years progress, you start getting a little bit more of a playful approach. I've had a few injuries that forced me into working some positions that I suck at, like being on my back and on my side and all that kind of stuff. So now I have a way more relaxed and playful jiu-jitsu game, especially depending on who I'm training with. But no, I never really bridged that gap between traditional martial arts and jiu-jitsu, just because, like I said, my experience with traditional martial arts was so long ago, and then I got into jiu-jitsu as a teenager. Really, I mean, I was like 18 years old when I started.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that question is because where the gap kind of gets. So I was training with John for about 6 months, and this is in Vegas. And Vegas is a heavy basketball town because of UNLV and yada yada. Like they won the championship when like my sophomore year. Anyway, you want to, if you want to get in fights a lot, go play pickup basketball. That's just that's just it, right? It's not a matter of if you're going to get into a fight that week. It's a matter of how many times, right? And this was Sunset Park in Vegas, which was the spot, right? And I remember after 6 months of jiu-jitsu, having that taekwondo background, a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of boxing, a little bit of karate and stuff like that. Every time I got into a thing, I just defaulted, right? Take the dude down, get on top, punch him in the face. Shit was usually over. But the problem with that is that's a lot of effort, and you usually wind up taking some shit on the way down, right? Yeah. Including, your knees and elbows as you're trying to do it. And then I remember, I don't care if the guy takes me down. So maybe these high kicks I've been working on my entire life might actually work, right? Maybe, maybe not. I just remember this one time getting into it, man. I didn't care. Dude, I threw that kick, and I missed the guy. It like really went like right in front of his face. And I landed. I was ready, and the dude just went, "Nah, bro, that's cool. You got the foul."
Jedi.
Dude, it was, I kick high, man. When I used to play baseball, dude, I played first base, and it's because I could do the full splits from those days and everything like that. But anyway, then you just went.
You're tall enough, you could be halfway to second and be.
Exactly. So, yeah. So I just found that to be kind of interesting where it opens everything up, you know. And I think it's interesting once jiu-jitsu started to take hold, all the traditional martial arts are like, no. Here are the hidden grappling techniques we've always worked on.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That.
My favorite is counter grappling.
Oh, yeah.
I still don't know what the fuck that is. If anybody does, please.
It's jujitsu. That's what it is.
I was going to say the way to counter grapple is to learn how to grapple
exactly
enough that you can defeat the person that's trying to grapple you. But it's there's there is some shortcuts, I'll say, but not against a real high level person. You know what I mean?
Yep. Exactly. So let's get on to the controversial part of what we're going to be talking about, right? So again, trying to have an open mind in everything, because that's really, about that whole self-reliant lifestyle, keeping what works, throwing away that which does not. So you're a Krav Maga Black Belt, right?
Yes.
And, in fairness to the audience, I kind of prepped Adam, so he kind of knows what's coming. So here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I, to this day, other than yourself, have never met a Krav Maga practitioner that wasn't weaponized Asperger's.
Oh, yeah. I can fully understand that.
And there's got to be something in there that where it went astray or something like that, where it was, there was some legitimate stuff going on here, and now it's just turned into the McDojo stuff, right? So you being the first dude that is a Krav Maga Black Belt that has incorporated it into his own practice and own, personal protection or whatever. Dude, set us straight on this stuff, man. What do people need to look for when they go to a Krav Maga school? What's bullshit? What's not bullshit? Why in the hell would a jiu-jitsu guy ever think about taking Krav Maga? Blah, blah, blah. Lay it on us, man.
So when I used to teach for the military, our program was heavily Krav Maga oriented. I had a little bit of influence over changing some things, but not enough to really do it the way I would do it if it was 100% mine. Mm-hmm. That being said, at the end of class, it was not uncommon to get students to say, "Hey, I live here. Where would you recommend I train?" And 9 times out of 10, after doing a little online research, I would recommend them a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school that also taught Muay Thai and boxing. And they always thought that was interesting because, we vocalized that our program was rooted in Krav Maga. And why not Krav Maga? Well, the reason is that 90+%, and probably higher than that, maybe even 95% of Krav Maga schools are basically teaching bullshit, and they're also doing it in like a Billy Blanks type of an approach. And I think the number one reason for that is a lack of depth of knowledge for the instructors. The Krav Maga community sometime years ago started this, depending on the organization and the affiliation, but a lot of like, hey, come to my 3-day, now you're at a Krav Maga instructor school. Mm-hmm. You get dudes that are like 6th-degree black belts in karate, go to this 3-day school, and then all of a sudden they change their business model and they throw up a Krav Maga sign. They're wearing black BDUs and tight shirts, and they're talking about being super aggressive and all this kind of stuff. But they don't have the depth of knowledge. That's still karate. That's a karate dude teaching something mm-hmm. that you learned for 3 days. Now, where I came up in Krav Maga is under a guy named Ernie Kirk, who at the time we were under the Krav Maga worldwide affiliation. This is going back to the early 2000s. His approach was, this is practical, as simple as can be, effective self-defense. So there was elements of boxing in there because he boxed. He was a black belt in judo, so there was some grappling in there. And then the classes were very intense. They were very physical. You were building this like never quit mentality. You couldn't really fake your way through it, but you were also building skills. Nowadays, I don't see a lot of the places really building skills. They're just kind of putting people through a workout, and which is bad enough by itself. But then on top of that, they're giving them this false sense of security that now you're a badass because you do Krav Maga. And in most cases, it couldn't be further from the truth. I've never seen a Krav Maga dude in the UFC.
Exactly.
Not that did anything, at least. Not that didn't have a background in other stuff.
Right.
And so it's just gotten to a point of ridiculousness. The other big point of contention I have with the Krav Maga community is that, and we talked about this a little bit offline, by definition, the way Krav Maga was created by its creator, Emi Lichtenfeld, who actually, that's even controversial too. There's another dude that may have had even more involvement with that, but it doesn't matter. It was, hey man, you're a stud, you're a wrestler, you're a boxer, like put together a defensive tactics program for us. Okay, cool. He did that. But the way he did it was, this needs to be an evolving body of work. This needs to be, if we find something better, we find something simpler, we add it in, we get rid. It's like the Bruce Lee mentality, take mm-hmm. what works and throw out the rest. So it never went that way, though, or at least for most of the organizations that I see now. I even have a guy that's not far from me who teaches what he calls clean Krav Maga. Clean Krav Maga, by his definition, is Krav Maga the way Emi taught it in the 1940s. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me because, that's almost 80 years ago now. And I don't even have the same cell phone I had 5 years ago. So if I'm going to upgrade, my technology for convenience, why wouldn't I upgrade my personal and protective skill set? Because I've seen that other things work. When the UFC came around in 1993, and you started seeing definitively what works and what doesn't, at least in a one-on-one context, that should be a clue. That should be a clue that your bread and butter needs to be, you need to know how to strike and you need to know how to grapple. Yep. Once you check those boxes, then if you find somebody that has a background in Krav that understands it enough and has the depth of knowledge to make it valuable, you can add in things like defending against a knife or defending against a gun or defending against more than one assailant. And technique wise, the system, Krav Maga, the original, system, some of the techniques are dated. I don't teach any Krav Maga knife defenses anymore. All my I'll show people if they want to know, but I explain to them that this is not Krav Maga. This is where I came up with this, or who I saw doing this, and the biggest one is Jerry Wetzel with his red zone knife defense, which I believe Paul Sharp teaches as well. It's basically wrestling. It's 2-on-1s. It's Russian ties. I was doing almost exactly the same thing he was doing, but he made videos and everything like that, and he publicized it. So, I think it's important to give him the credit. And I've modified some of my stuff based on conversations with him as well. But it works, and I can duplicate it. I can give two dudes a knife. Matter of fact, not that long ago, 2 guys I used to work with at the DoD sought me out because they said, hey, they want us to start teaching edge weapons defense, but we really don't know, how to do that. So they came I said, yeah, come to the gym. We'll play around for a little bit. So I said, well, what are you doing now? And he showed me. It was like a Kali type, like X, block or whatever. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, I'm not really sure. I said, well, let's find out. So I gave them each a fist helmet and a knock knife. And I said, you stab him, you try not to get stabbed. And that's it. Let him go balls to the wall a couple times. Dude got peppered up, stabbed up pretty good. I took the helmets off. Everybody's breathing heavy. I said, how do you feel about, your technique? And he's like, not very good, not very confident. I said, okay, well, that saves us 20 minutes of arguing about whether or not the technique is effective. We just definitively learned the technique is ineffective. So let's put that over here. Now let's try something else. And then we got into something like Jerry Wetzel's dive and drive and getting 2-on-1 control and stuff like that. And after about an hour of playing around, those guys left there able to much more effectively manage that problem in a real, aggressive, competitive and non-consensual, as Craig would say, environment. So, the proof's in the pudding. But yeah, man, Krav Maga as a community, a lot of problems, a lot of holes. I can't recommend too many Krav Maga instructors who are just Krav Maga instructors. There's some dudes that are starting to drop the name and change their curriculum and stuff like that, and good on them for that. But yeah, man, it's got a lot of issues. And to tell you the truth, I've almost dropped the name quite a few times. I keep it more for name recognition. It gets people to me that are looking for self-defense, and then I can get in front of them and explain to them why Krav Maga is probably not exactly what they're looking for, but I think I can help them anyway. And a little bit as a homage to the fact that, the way that I came up with Krav Maga was pretty legit. I mean, we were basically boxing and kickboxing and grappling. It wasn't what you see now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think my first exposure to it, I can't even tell you when that was. It was kind of like, the first thing I thought, I was like, oh, this is kind of like the Israeli Jeet Kune Do type thing, right? Where there was a mixture of things, and they were very progressive, and the name was just like the Jeet Kune Do guys. This is where we started. This is our philosophy. We're putting in as much as we possibly can to make our art more effective. Somewhere from there, it all became mindset and eye gouges.
Yeah. And
and that's dangerous, man. That's dangerous.
I tell people all the time, the groin kicking, the eye gouging, the biting, all that stuff. Like, is it skills that you can use? Yeah, it is. But to me, it's like a last resort thing. It's not plan A. That's for sure.
Yeah.
First of all, like when I worked in law enforcement in the city, I don't want to bite any of the people. That might be more dangerous than letting them beat the shit out of me. So the biting, the eye gouging, biting and eye gouging and groin kicks are not techniques. They're what you do when the techniques don't work or you're outmatched and you're in a bad position. And they're bridges to the next thing. They're not, I've kicked dudes in the groin and had them just stand there and look at me. I've been kicked in the groin and just stood there and looked at them. 20 minutes later, I might be in a lot of pain.
Oh, yeah.
But I've had widely varying results with a lot of those techniques. So I just don't think that, Krav Maga wants to package everything as a shortcut. I don't fully agree that there's no shortcuts. There's a lot of dudes that'll say like you have to do 10 years of jujitsu and 4 years of Muay Thai and this and that. And the reality is for the average person, that's not practical. They're not going to do that. You know, the average person is not guys like you and me who spend their free time and money shooting and fighting and doing all these other things. That's not average. That's probably, you know, a very small percentage of society. You know, the primary and secondary people that watch that and all that stuff. That's a small sliver of society. But the soccer mom or the whatever who wants to learn some skills, if she went to a Krav Maga place that had enough depth of knowledge to give her like the cliff notes of other systems, hey, here's how to throw some basic punches and generate power. Here's how to use some basic vertical grappling, like what Craig would teach in a weekend, like underhooks, overhooks, bicep ties. She would leave there better prepared for violence than she came. Yeah. She would not be ready to fight in the UFC. She would still get the shit kicked out of her if she fought against a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner or mixed martial artist. But that's not likely anyway. I mean, the reality, you know, people, you know, Tom Givens says it all the time. People defend themselves all the time with no training. You know what I mean? People are winning gunfights with no training. Doesn't make it a good strategy.
The chick in Detroit with the high point carbine, right?
Yeah. You know, doesn't make it a good strategy, and it's not one that I would advocate. But I definitely think that with the right instructor, some training is certainly better than no training. And I've got people in my classes that they're not going to compete in jiu-jitsu. They're not going to put the time in that it takes to get good. So I look at my job as how do I make them at least a little bit more effective than they were when they walked through the door? Doesn't have to be a professional fighter.
So here's a question for you, and I hope it's not a, you know, I hope I'm not throwing you a curveball. But so other than yourself, right? Someone doesn't live in Philly or they can't come and train with you. That person who's not going to spend 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu, or, you know, 3, 4 year, 6 years doing the same thing in Muay Thai or anything like that. In order for your average guy or gal to be proficient at all the ranges, what would you suggest that they do? What would you like? Who should they go train with? What time should they? How much time should they dedicate to all that? Because the main thing that I get from guys like, hey man, I'd love to do jujitsu, but I love my gats and I love shooting, and I don't want to take time away from that. Right. You know. And my whole thing is, well, dude, everything is jujitsu, and they're like, great, take your paintbrushes and butterflies, dude, and hit the road. I'm like, well, I do all my shit better than you, so shut the fuck up. Anyway. Build a program for these people, man. If they're just looking to beat, like we used to say, actually, I said this on the Paul thing, and I'm going to take that back. It used to be done like if you were a blue belt in jiu-jitsu 10 years ago,
yeah, you could beat
98% of the people on the face of the earth, right? And then I said, maybe now it's 10. But I go, you know what? That's only because jiu-jitsu is so prevalent. You know, it's more mainstream. But those people, so if I say, you can still beat 98% of the people that don't practice jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. But how much time does that take? So I don't know, dude, build your noob a program going through the ranges. So let's start off with, and this is strictly your opinion, everybody, so calm down, internet. Sure. So firearms training, right? Let's say 10 yards, right? Mm-hmm. Again, other than me, other than you, blah, blah, blah. Who should they take a course from? And what goal should they have?
So first of all, I wouldn't even start with firearms because that's the least likely problem that they're going to have.
Cool. All right.
So you're statistically way more like for example, me. I worked in law enforcement. I worked in security. I worked in private, armed everything, and the amount of gunplay I've had is this big. The amount of fist fights and everything is this big. So
for the audio listeners out there, he did a pinch versus a bear hug. So,
yeah, I forgot to audio only too. So yeah, I think you're way more likely to get involved in a fist fight than you are a gunfight or a knife fight. So I think logic would dictate that you should probably start there. I think physical fitness should probably be the paramount thing because, you know, if you think about all these techniques, they're designed to work against bigger, stronger, fitter people. If you are a bigger, stronger, fitter person, automatically you're going to be a problem for a lot of people. So fitness is big. Then if we start getting into the ranges, once we get into inside arms distance or 2 arms distance, striking. So you gotta go out and seek a reputable striking program. For me, I would go probably right to Muay Thai. Boxing's good too, but Muay Thai adds in, the rest of the limbs, so you might as well go right there. I would say 6 months on Muay Thai, and you're going to be a totally different person. You know what I mean? Not just fitness wise, but also your capabilities. So if you did a couple classes a week for 6 months, that's not a lifetime commitment, but you're going to be able to generate power. You're going to understand how to use your hips, and you're going to understand how all of your limbs to make problems for people. And even as a grappler, I still consider myself a grappler, even though I do other stuff. I've probably, ended up hitting quite a bit of people, and because I'm able to do that well, especially because I'm a bigger guy, I don't have to then use my grappling. So able to save myself physically, energy wise, because most of my fights involve more than one person too, which is another reason why I'm not double leg taking dudes down to the ground and mounting them, because in the environments that I've worked in and been in, that's going to get me fucked up pretty quick, because someone start hitting me over the head with some other shit. So Muay Thai. Then you got to have some grappling. You know what I mean? And if you can find a wrestling program, that would probably be great, because the vertical grappling piece is going to be more emphasized than the horizontal grappling piece. So if you can get some basic understanding of underhooks and overhooks and leverage and body positioning through wrestling, that's great. If not, at least dabble in jujitsu. You don't have to make it a lifelong pursuit, but if you could get to the blue belt level of jujitsu, you're going to be so much better off against 99% of the population, just between your fitness, your Muay Thai, and a little bit of grappling. And then once after that, it's kind of like you can start dabbling around with the menu. If you're a state that has concealed carry and you want to carry a firearm, start going out and looking into training for that. The first place I would go for firearms training, other than just to try to get like a local instructor if you can, which is really hard. But like a basic course where you have familiarity with the weapon, you can consistently put rounds on target at a reasonable distance. You're safe, all the basic stuff that you need to know right out the gate. After that, I would go to Craig's ECQC course, simply because it's an eye-opener for people who carry guns. My experience with people who carry guns, other than our community, which again is that little sliver, is that they think that it's going to solve all their problems. And not only is it not, because in most cases, they're probably not even justified in using it. They probably can't get it out. They have understanding, they're standing in front of that paper target, working sub-second draws or whatever. But they've never done that with someone right here. Yeah. And that's how it happens. I mean, the few incidents I've been involved with that involve guns, all of them were right here. So, a program like Craig's, where in 3 days you're gonna have a much better understanding of how difficult. If you walk away from ECQC with nothing more than understanding how challenging it can be to get your weapon out when you need it, then that's worth the price of admission. I use the terminology earn the opportunity to access. So I need to earn the opportunity to access my gun, earn the opportunity to access my knife. I need to earn the opportunity to escape. All those things involve probably using these first to get that distance or to get to that position, that supports me being able to access my weapon. But yeah, short answer, fitness, probably Muay Thai or boxing if you can't find Muay Thai near you. Grappling of some kind. Wrestling would probably be preferred for the stand-up application. Jiu-jitsu if not. And then like you said, eventually what tends to happen is people start to gravitate towards one of those things, and it becomes more of a hobby. If that happens, great. If it doesn't, start getting into the firearm side of things. Knife stuff, go take Edge Weapons overview. It's 2 days, and you'll figure out very quickly that you don't have to be a fucking ninja to use a knife offensively.
That's Craig's class too, right?
Yeah,
Edge Weapons overview, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the one I'm gonna help out with in March. He's doing it at Annette Evans's place, just outside of Philadelphia. And
is that a complete neophyte type?
Basically, it's ECQC with a knife. So.
Oh, okay.
So your bad breath range, you're fighting. You have to earn the opportunity to get your knife out. You're using it just to get the person off of you. There is no like targeting of this this artery, that artery kind of thing. It's not a I'm gonna get
this sinew, this
I can feel the hate mail coming from the colleague community. But no, it's not a Filipino, you have a knife, I have a knife, we're dueling. It's dude, I got a knife, whether it's on my belt line, it's in my pocket, whatever. You're beating the shit out of me, and I got to figure out how to get that knife out so that I can stop that from happening. That's what the class is. CCQC with a knife.
Okay. Awesome. You talked about physical fitness, right? And that always comes up and kind of drives me crazy, but I'm not going to preload you on that. When people said, hey, I'm going to do jujitsu, but I want to get in shape first before I go.
Yeah, that drives me crazy too.
Okay. So I don't want to confuse people, right? I don't want people doing CrossFit for a year. I mean, I said CrossFit, drink. I got no problem with that. I got, obviously people know that I do. I'm a fan of the WOD, right? But people go off and they waste this time and getting in what they think is good shape for jujitsu, and then they go to jujitsu and get fucking wrecked anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not gonna matter. People come into jujitsu from all different walks of life. You got distance athletes, you got couch potatoes, you got power lifters and everything in between. And the reality is that it sucks for everybody when you get in there, because unless you're a wrestler or a grappler of some other variation where you're used to that type of very specific movement and pressure and being in shitty positions, you're going to have a tough time. It's going to be a learning process. It's going to be a work in progress. You're going to have some frustrations. You're going to have some ups and some downs. But there's absolutely no reason that anybody can't just get up, go to their local jiu-jitsu place and start training today, especially if it's a good school, if it's a reputable school, and they're not a bunch of idiots. They're not gonna kill you. They're not gonna throw you right into live training. But just moving around, just being in these positions on the ground is challenging for a lot of people. It's something that most of us don't do. Most of us live a fairly sedentary lifestyle. We sleep in a bed, we sit in a chair during the day, we sit in the car on the way to and from, and there's not a whole lot of other stuff going on. So sitting on the ground, moving on the ground, just being in these different positions that children are always in is difficult for a lot of adults.
Yep.
So get in there, do it. Doing a CrossFit workout, going for a run, all that stuff, it's probably not going to make a tremendous difference anyway. And all you're doing is extending the length of time before you actually get in there and start training. And for most people, like I said, you'd be much better off to just go in there, start training. You're going to get in shape naturally. You're going to have fun. You're going to meet some really cool people, some of the best people I've ever met.
Yep.
I've met on the mats. But yeah, no prerequisite, nothing needed. I don't like that whole I got to get in shape to get in shape. No, just do it. Get out there, go join a gym, and you'll get in shape. I know, dude. One of my best training partners is a 205-pound ish black belt. He was over 300 pounds when he started jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I have another very good friend who's one of my students who's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu as well. He came to me at 280 pounds and he's now like 195 pounds.
Yeah.
And some of that is from other stuff, diet, nutrition, whatever, but a lot of it is just from coming in and training, and there's no better motivator too than coming into a jiu-jitsu school and getting stuck under a dude and just feeling helpless. You go home and next time you're looking at that piece of cake, you're like, man, I gotta really get my shit together because
you feel it.
You
feel that piece of cake a day later when you're rolling.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm no physical specimen, but a lot of the physical fitness, the exercise, nutrition stuff that I've changed about my life as I've gotten a little older has been as a direct result of getting my ass kicked in jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more frustrating than being a 265-pound black belt in jiu-jitsu, leaving the gym feeling like dejected because I just got my ass kicked by my 175-pound training partner who was a D1 wrestler and is a black belt himself. But I'm like, God damn it. You know what I mean? So then you go home and it affects everything else that you're doing. You because that empirically happened.
Yeah.
I need to make some adjustments or it's going to continue to happen.
Right. Exactly. 100%, man. And I kind of wanted to find pressure for the audience, right? Because it's kind of hard to do that unless you felt grappling pressure. You kind of don't know, but we're gonna give it a good college try here, right? When we're talking about pressure, we're not talking about social pressure to perform. There is that.
Right.
There is that, like I was talking to Paul about. But what I'm talking about with pressure is the dude has your left hip pinned with his hip.
Mm-hmm.
He is side body cross and has your right shoulder pinned. So body works like an X, right? So you've got that seatbelt line being crushed, and his shoulder is against your chin,
Yep.
pulling your head away from the direction you want to go to get your guard back, right?
Yep.
And the amazing thing is after a while, you get used to that shit.
Yeah.
You just
it starts off, pressure to me starts off as a feeling of helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck underneath of somebody. You've never been in that position before, and you're panicking. You're nervous. You're anxious. You're like,
and you stop breathing.
Stop breathing. Yeah. Like most people in jiu-jitsu that start getting out of breath, it has nothing to do with their fitness level. It's just that they're exerting a lot more energy and effort than they need to because they're getting all worked up and getting all excited because they're stuck in shitty positions. So yeah, pressure to me in the beginning level would be, helplessness. You feel helpless. As you get more comfortable, that guy I just talked about, my training partner, the D1 wrestler, black belt. He'll put me in knee on belly. He'll hold me down. It's the same pressure in terms of physically what he's doing to me. My reaction to it at this point in the game is much different. My reaction to it is to relax, to try to, be calm, don't overexert myself, and just start looking for an opportunity to get out of there, or looking for a way to create an opportunity to get out of there. So.
Yep. And again, I think it's, people talk about situational awareness and yada, yada, but then they don't give you things to practice. Just be more aware.
Yeah.
Bro, we all know if you don't train certain things or have specific skill building exercises, this shit just doesn't happen.
Right.
You want to be situationally aware, like I said with Paul, run a mat with 20 people on it,
Mm-hmm.
right, so that you can prevent them from but we always say it's not the strongest or the fastest, although those things invariably help, but it's a guy that's 2 to 3 steps ahead. And when you start understanding how people move and the way the body works, and what they're going to do based on which way they're looking, which way their hips are, which way their feet are, the way they shift their weight, then you start getting those 2 to 3 steps ahead, and that automatically transfers out to being more aware of your environment so that you can be 2 to 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The proprioception that you get from jiu-jitsu translates.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? The difference for me between black belt and brown belt was not that I learned more techniques or that I could do them on the weak side or whatever. It was just these little subtle things that I was doing with my body that I probably couldn't even articulate or would have a really tough time explaining if I was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I just start to sink into these little positions that make it so much worse for the person underneath of me, but make it so much more effective for what I'm doing on top.
Yep.
If that makes sense. So, yeah, absolutely.
So one more question, and then we'll get to the final segment here. Something else that drives me crazy. So you're on my side of the family, right? The Carlos side. To be clear, guys, jujitsu is jujitsu, but something that often comes up, right? And I often tell people this: the first time I heard that competition will get you killed in the streets wasn't in firearms; it was in jujitsu, right?
Yeah.
That being said, self-defense jujitsu versus sport jujitsu. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a difference? Should people be aware of where they sign up based on that? What do you think?
I would say there's a difference in how each school's culture is. So, like, for example, Paul and being with the Straight Blast Gym organization, I really like the way they run their organization. I really like they have a very specific teaching modality. They've got some really intelligent, like John Danaher type dudes that are whiteboarding stuff, but they're doing it all with personal protection and self-defense in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily teaching Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense like the old school headlock and all that kind of stuff, but they're teaching how to make Jiu-Jitsu as effective in self-defense as it would be in competition. There are, however, other schools that are not doing anything remotely like that, and they're legitimately teaching people to compete and exploit the rules in competition.
Mm-hmm.
And although the movements and the techniques are all basically the same, the intention's different. So if you train at a school where your intention is specifically competition, yeah, you're probably still better than 99% of the freaking regular people that aren't training at all. I mean, Paul said, not that long ago, he's like, you're a badass, you know what I mean? Like, act like it. But you're also doing a lot of things that somebody in the street, like some North Philly hood rat dude that's just a big tough motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
You go to slide in there and put him in like De La Hiva. I'm going to tell you right now, that dude's going to cave your fucking head in.
Yeah.
No shit about De La Hiva. He doesn't know what you're doing, and he doesn't care, but he's going to pummel your head. And if you've never thought about that or you've never trained like that, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. So I don't know that it's so much like sport jiu-jitsu versus self-defense jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is pretty much jiu-jitsu. It's your intention and your intent in how you're training. And I really like Paul and Chris Howder's approach to think street, train self-defense, or something about the art. I forget the exact quote, but basically what they're saying is, think about the street application of your jiu-jitsu. Think about, as I'm in this position, could I get my head caved in? Train sport. Train as in jiu-jitsu is a sport. Go in, train, have fun, learn techniques, work your deficiencies, get out of bad positions. But be prepared to put it all together. So we do at my gym every once in a while. What we'll do is we'll just throw gloves on and we'll do regular jiu-jitsu matches, more of a combat jiu-jitsu approach where you're actually doing some striking. And what that does is, you'd be surprised. I got a good training partner who's a black belt, very, very talented dude. He's a tough dude. He's like one of everybody's nightmares on the mat. And when we put gloves on, his jiu-jitsu absolutely changes. As soon as he gets punched in the face, it changes a lot. So I think it has more to do with how you train and where you train and what the mindset or the culture is of your school, rather than the jiu-jitsu itself, the techniques of the jiu-jitsu itself. That'd be the best way that I can articulate that.
Awesome. And the other thing is, you got to make it work. Like, for example, everybody knows I have bad knees from all that pickup basketball that I used to play, right? Sure. I cannot do your traditional knee in, hip, shrimp to get your guard back. I can't do that because I can't put heel to butt, right? So my game, even though I'm a big dude, I'm heavily deep half guard, right? Because I don't need to bend my knees. It's my whole body versus your leg I'm getting on top. But I've pressure tested that with, kind of slap jujitsu, punch jujitsu and stuff like that. And if I do it enough, I have you off leverage to where you can't hit me, but I also can't hang out either.
And that's also your version of preparing for a sort of worst case scenario where you're underneath of me or whatever. If you look at Chris Howder and his approach to jiu-jitsu, I think his principles are totally sound. Basically, he's like, get on top, stay on top. Okay. Yep. So if this is a real fight and for whatever reason we're going to the ground, which that's a whole separate conversation, as far as going to the ground intentionally or unintentionally. I personally do not advocate intentionally going to the ground in all but the most rare of cases, simply for the fact that the majority of the fights that I've ever been involved in were not just me and one other person. So because I can't account for those other variables when I'm on the ground, I would rather utilize my striking skills first and my vertical grappling to keep myself upright and mobile.
Sure.
And if I need to, I have the skills on the ground to support it. But Chris Howder says, get on top, stay on top. All right. So if this is a real fight, this is not me just, training with a bunch of training partners, working my deficiencies. This is a real fight. Somehow we end up on the ground intentionally or unintentionally. Get on top, stay on top. And then his other big thing is, use the guard the way that it was really intended to be used, which is as kind of like a fail safe or like a fallback, not like a go-to, but the guard is like what you do basically when you fucked up.
Yeah.
And you use it.
Or you don't have a choice.
Yeah. I'm in that position. Like I'm not running in there and pulling guard in a real fight. That's just absurd. Actually, Chris Howder's got a really funny quote about that. I think he says like, guard pulling's like masturbation. We all do it, but it's fucked up if you brag about it.
Exactly. Oh, dude,
Yeah,
I've never heard that. That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's a great quote. But anyway, get on top, stay on top. Use your guard to basically fix whatever you fucked up. So if I'm on the bottom and I get to my guard, I'm using that as a tool to get back on top. I'm not trying to hang out there. I'm not
100%.
trying to stay there.
But
So I think that's a
become
sound strategy. I also
that's
like
that's
the
the Carlos side of the family, bro.
yeah. Well, and that's Henzo too. I mean, if you've ever met Henzo, he's a super nice guy, but he's been involved in a lot of real fights. And his thing
Yep.
is, like, look, just fucking get on top of people and beat the shit out of them. He's not a even though his guys now with Danaher and all them are doing a lot of leg locks and all that stuff, they still have solid fundamentals, before that.
Oh, absolutely.
The other thing I wanted
Absolutely.
to mention too about Chris and Paul and those guys with the Straight Blast Gym organization is the other thing that they put out there that I really like is the way that they discuss physical attributes in relation to technique. So, basically what they advocate is that you work your techniques in jiu-jitsu by removing as many physical attributes as possible. So not using your
Sure.
strength, not using your speed, your size. And then you're always going to have those physical attributes to add back into the equation when it's for real. You know what I mean? I think that methodology is really sound. It's helped me a lot,
Yeah.
because bigger guy, one of my biggest crutches in the beginning was I was fit, I was strong, I was athletic. So I could get away with some really sloppy shit, especially in no gi.
Yeah.
And then eventually, as I get better and I start competing or training with guys who are better than I am significantly,
It doesn't work.
shit wasn't working anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the president of that fan club, bro.
yeah. So, yeah.
You
So
know.
remove those physical attributes and then reinsert them later.
Yeah. And I will say this, I make fun of the sides of the family just because it's comical to watch all those fucking politics going on and everything like that. But I will say, Bev, dude, she's doing a program at a Helson school, right?
Okay.
From the other, and she loves it. It's not because it's this side of the family versus that side of the
Right.
family. It's really the instructor, right?
Yep.
My instructor, my professor Tony, he's they go, caralho, Mark goes, hey, ladies, come here for a second. Let me show you this a detail.
Yeah. Yep.
And she loves it over there. Where with Tony, she would get like PTSD because of how much he doesn't yell. He just, he speaks loudly, right?
There's a,
And
there's there's a
there's
lot of
different
politics.
styles.
There's a lot of politics in jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of politics in Krav Maga. Me personally, I've just never given a shit about any of that. It's always been about just getting better and taking
Mhm.
what I can, whether it was from the Helson school I was affiliated with before, or the Henzo school I'm affiliated with now. Um, it's really just about it's a selfish approach. You know what I mean? It's like, hey,
Yeah,
I don't give a fuck about
exactly.
I'm allowed to wear a white gi or I have to wear this gi or whatever. I mean, I was in Puerto Rico working a big security detail last year, and I ran into Dean Lister
Mm.
hotel, and he's like, "You want to train?" Like they're training in the basement, and I'm like, "Yeah, I love to train, but I'm working 20 hours a day, and it's not going to happen." But some places you go, you can't even train if you don't have a white gi, and I get it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, I mean that's the preservation of their tradition and stuff like that. And I get it. You got to hold your arms a certain way when you take a
Yeah,
picture.
I mean, I get it.
I
There's
get
culture and there's respect, and at the end of the day, it is a martial art. But me personally, Adam Scholl doesn't give a fuck about your white gis and all that stuff. I just want to grapple. You know what I mean?
it.
I just wanna roll. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. You said the different sides of the family and all that stuff. I don't get caught up in any of that shit. If she's training jujitsu at another school, the important takeaway for me is that she's training jujitsu.
Exactly, dude. People are asking me, it was like, two different sides. I'm like, I could give a shit. She's training jujitsu. You know how long I've been working on this?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
all.
the funny thing, dude, like after like years and years, they're like, hey, just honey, get in my guard real quick. I just want to see if I got this, right? She's like, get out of here. Her first full class, she's like, hey, do me a favor, get in this position. I want to see if I got this. And I'm like, are you shitting me? After 10 years, now you're doing it. She's like,
That's
shut up
awesome.
and do it. I'm like, okay. Anyway, all right, dude. Well, let's get to the final segment of this, which is the get it off your chest segment. Okay. What does that mean? The case that, people just tuning in, what can people start doing to get better, or what can they stop doing to get better? It can be about firearms, executive protection, jujitsu, whatever you want to talk about, brother. No, don't talk about your neighbors. Nobody cares about them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Start doing to get better is just go out and get involved. So if you're that guy that's like, I want to get in shape to do jujitsu or whatever, forget that. Go to the jujitsu place, sign up, and just make the commitment to get in there at least a couple days a week. Whether it's jujitsu, whether it's boxing, Muay Thai, we'll insert whatever here, whether it's shooting. Just get off the couch and go out and do it. Too many people sitting around talking about doing it, critiquing people on the internet and all this bullshit. And they're not doing anything themselves. So just get up, get outside, and go make it happen. Stop doing, one of the biggest things I have a problem with is I got a lot of problems, but hero worship's a big one. Like people that glorify an instructor or an organization so much that they refuse to accept that those people are people, and that maybe they put out something that wasn't accurate, or maybe somebody else did it a little bit better, or whatever. People get super cult-like when it comes to organizations, affiliations, instructors, and I'm a member of some groups on the internet, where somebody will say something about something, and then everyone will jump in and say, no, you got to go to this guy, he's the best, and that's cool. A guy, he's a good guy. I mean, I refer people to Craig Douglas all the time. I think he's a great instructor, and he has an incredibly well-defined delivery, and he's a good human being. Do I think Craig Douglas is infallible and can't make mistakes and is some fucking combative's god? No, I think he's a smart dude who spent a lot of time working his craft. He honed it. But that doesn't mean some other dude couldn't come along and disprove something that he's doing, or improve upon something that he's doing, or whatever. So hero worship is a big one. The other one that really pisses me off is giving students false senses of security, and that's a big one in the Krav Maga community specifically. These women's self-defense seminars. I have nothing against women's self-defense seminars. I've taught a lot of them myself, but these women's self-defense seminars that are almost like more of an empowerment session, where you're telling a 120-pound female that she can beat up a 250-pound male, and she might be able to, but she would be the outlier in almost all but the most rare of cases, and she would also have to dedicate a lot of time into training and becoming more physically capable. In a 1 day, 8 hour, 4 hour, whatever, to walk in and walk out and think you're a totally different person and that now you're ready for anything. If you're perpetuating that kind of bullshit as an instructor, you are irresponsible and you are negligent, and you should not be teaching people. I have women in my classes. I let them know the reality is this: if you're going to fight me, you're going to have to really work hard. You're going to have a lot harder time, probably, than if you're fighting another woman of the same size and relative skill and physical capabilities. So what does that mean? It means we need to figure out the smartest way to do that. And we also need to figure out how to earn the opportunity to escape, more so than win the fight. I don't necessarily advocate staying there and winning the fight unless there's absolutely no other alternative. Like, I'm there with my 80-year-old mother who can't walk, and I can't, get her out, right? I just want to earn the opportunity to escape. Forget about my ego. Forget about, how this happened, why this happened. Doesn't matter. Get the fuck out of there, and then you can worry about it another time. But yeah, those two things are real big pet peeves of mine. Falsely preparing people or giving them a false sense of security, and hero worship. And then the other thing, one other thing that really drives me crazy is our community eating its own. There's a lot of negativity at that. But this is the grip, or this is the what. Listen, there's 10 guys teaching shooting that are all fucking studs that can wear out that target all day long. And I bet you each one of them has some subtle variation that they do differently than the other one.
Yep.
They might all be generally thumbs forward, isosceles, both eyes open, whatever. But there's going to be some subtle differences: elbows locked, elbows bent, this, that, red dot, whatever. It's, the point is, find what works for you. You know what I mean? Don't go out there and go to this one instructor's course and say, this is the only way to do it. That's ridiculous. You know, that's totally ridiculous. There's many ways to get this work done. There's definitely, I look at everything as like a tactical goalpost. I learned this at a SWAT school a long time ago. Everything I think of is within a goalpost. When I kick a field goal, anywhere within that goalpost, it's still a field goal, still 3 points, still gets it. However, if I hit the post or I miss the post, it's no good, right? So how does that translate to our world? There's a lot of different ways to do things in the middle there that are all perfectly acceptable and work. There's also some ways that are totally bullshit and they don't work and they've been disproven. You know what I mean? So as long as you're within that middle ground there and you're doing it slightly different than the next guy, it's all about the results.
Yeah, that's a great analogy because that goalpost is your metric, right? I always say that's great. You say it works for you, but what metric are you basing that on? You know, so you're saying, here's my intended metric of putting, the ball through the goalpost. That's your metric. Or in our thing, to do X in X time with X amount of accuracy. If you're saying it works for you, right? And you're not basing it.
It's like one of those things that goes both ways. Usually it's a bullshit statement. It's a cop out. Like I could have said, it was 16 years ago when I was training, when I first was really getting into shooting, and I was shooting thumbs crossed, one eye's closed, Weaver like fucking Jack Bauer. I could have said it works for me because I'm hitting the target.
Right.
The reality was, until I met some Blackwater dudes that I started shooting with that were shooting thumbs forward, both eyes open, more of an isosceles approach, I would not have been able to do the things I could do with that method.
Sure.
My previous method. So yeah, it worked for me because all I was doing was sitting there hitting a fucking steel target from, 20 yards or 15 yards or whatever, not moving, not doing X, Y, and Z. Once you get comfortable with that and you want to start pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, that's when you have to be willing to accept the input from people that are more experienced than you in those fields and say, Scott Jedlinski is a fucking really good dude with a red dot. I have a red dot and I don't know a whole lot about it. I don't have a whole ton of time behind it. If I really want to get better with that red dot, maybe I should seek out somebody like Scott Jedlinski to help me get there. That's all,
Yep, that's it. All right, brother. Well, we're going to wrap this up, man. Where can people find you?
So first of all, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, dude.
You've had some really great guests so far, and I'm honored and privileged to be amongst them. My company is Scholl Security Group. The original idea with that is that it was going to be not just training, although right now the bulk of what I'm doing business-wise is self-defense, Krav Maga, Jujitsu training, combatives training. But I also do a lot of private security stuff, so that's probably eventually going to be coming down the pike. That's SchollSecurityGroup.com, Instagram, Scholl Security Group, Facebook, Scholl Security Group. And then also I've got, personal Facebook under Adam Scholl, YouTube channel, Scholl Security Group. I don't put out a lot of content, mostly because I'm too busy doing shit instead of sitting there trying to figure out how to talk about doing shit. But I would like to start putting out more content. I haven't had the time. I made the video about the yoga block thing that you
do. Dude, that was great. When people ask me all the time about it, I'm like, I just send them your link.
Yeah. It's funny, man. My views went up like crazy since you started doing that. But, so I appreciate that. But, yeah, that was like a very impromptu thing. And if I had it to do over again, I would have went into a little bit more depth. I might even do a part 2, but just.
Sure. Yeah. Do a part 2. It was good though, bro. Hey man, it's 1,000 times better than the one I did about making them. I never fucking did.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, I'm doing little videos here and there. I do a lot of T&E for PHLster and Henry Holster and stuff like that. So, I try to put out some content. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm very accessible. I'm usually very receptive to returning messages and stuff like that. I'm building some courses that I'd like to eventually take on the road in a Craig Douglas ShivWorks kind of an orientation where, go here for 2 days, go there for 2 days. So if that's something anybody's interested in, just reach out to me directly. And
awesome, dude. We'll talk about that, man. I'm interested in that stuff. So awesome, brother. Hey, you said you were honored. I'm honored to have someone like yourself with your breadth of experience on there, man. So thanks for coming on. As far as me, let's pay some bills, guys. If you want to train with me, go to modernsamuraiproject.com, look at the classes button. It'll tell you where I'm coming. If I'm not coming to your area, well, you just need to look harder because I'm all over the place. Very blessed in that. If you want to work out your draw, maybe your reloads, we could do that in a virtual lesson. Go ahead and check that out. Plenty of reviews on that, including a video that I did and other reviews. So check that out as well. Guys, like and subscribe. It helps me out. Again, everyone says, hey, man, this is awesome. I can't believe you only got 2,900 subscribers. Well, neither can I. Help a brother out here. All right. Anyway, but beyond that, dude, I don't care if I get more followers, just as long as the right people are getting this information so they can get better, so that they can be good, stay safe, get training.